to another edition of the Mindset Game podcast, and I'm your host, James Roberts. Before we get started with this week's show, first off, let me take this opportunity to welcome back the regular listeners, and if this is your first time listening to the show, I hope you enjoy this episode and decide to subscribe to the show. Today's episode is going to be slightly a bit different. It's going to be a short one with just me. In today's video, I'm going to cover protein. Protein provides the building blocks for everything from muscle to skin and hair, so it's no doubt is vital. The average person needs about 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight a day. For those people that on a weight loss mission might consider upping their intake of protein as well. However, it's still vital to keep a check on your total calorie intake, as protein provides 4 calories per gram, so it's not a case of the more you eat, the slimmer you'll get. So the point I mean by this is the more protein you eat, there's a greater thermogenic response. So to kind of elaborate that point a little bit more, if I use an example of 100 calories equals 15 grams of carbs, to burn that, and it would be the same case with 5 grams of fat and 35 grams of protein. So you can see from that protein is a faster, how would I term the point? Faster way of burning more calories, because it's harder to break down that protein that you've eaten. So coming on to the next point, you might have heard or may not have heard of Gremlin. This is a hormone that increases hunger. So there's nothing you can do about it in terms of getting rid of it completely, as it is a genetic hormone. So you've either got it in a higher amount or a lower amount, and there's nothing you can do about that. However, protein intake will help to decrease that necessity on hunger. So the more protein you eat throughout the day, the less hungry you will be, and thus not craving things that are higher in calories, such as chocolate and other things of that nature. So when we come on to this next point of how much protein do you need if you exercise, that depends on how often, how hard the workout is, the type of exercise you do, and how big you actually are. So it's far from an exact science. So if you take an average woman, for example, who goes to the gym, whether she's doing cardio or weights, I'd suggest that person take between 1 to 1.2 grams per kilo body weight would be enough. But as I said earlier, it's not an exact science, so it would vary, as I said, between men and women, how big you are, how tall you are, what exercise you're doing, and the intensity of the exercise. So the last point I'm going to come to now is why you might want to take a protein shake. Obviously, when we come back to that point with your body weight, in terms of how much you want to intake on a daily basis, is going to vary between 1 to 1.5 grams per kilo, or as we term it, pounds. Either whichever system you're using, it would be against that. So if we use me for an example, I'm about 63 kilos. So for me, I would have to intake, as I'm exercising as well, we're going to look at the upper levels of protein intake. So mine would be about 1.5. So it would be roughly, intaking about 190 grams of protein a day. So from my personal experience, I'm only able to get roughly about 100 grams of that from natural food sources, so be it meat, poultry, fish, and eggs. and the rest of that I've got to supplement with a protein shake. So that extra 90 grams I've got to find from somewhere else. So I've got to rely on that protein shake to find that other 90 grams of protein. So when we look at it from that aspect, if you are that far off in terms of your macro intake in terms of protein, you might want to look at protein intake. Whereas for somebody that's in the ballpark of, say, 120 grams a day or below, you want to get your protein intake from natural sources such as red meat, white meat such as poultry, turkey, fish, you name it, and eggs, and then obviously plant-based foods such as lentils and countless others. So my point to take on from that, it's going to vary from person to person what you have to do. Obviously some people will have to look up taking a protein shake, some others won't. So coming to the ones that do have to take a protein shake, the things that you want to look out for are that if it's a simple whey protein, you want the product to contain at least 80% protein per 100 grams of that serving. So be that, obviously there's multiple protein sources in terms of protein powders such as concentrate, isolate and casein. The difference between the three, obviously concentrate is more common. It is also a cheaper form of whey protein, so obviously if you're on a budget, that's maybe something you want to look at. And isolate is obviously a better form of whey protein. Obviously it comes with a cost, so if your general goal is obviously to put muscle on, some people might respond well to that, some others might not. So what you take on from that is probably a concentrate would do anybody just fine, and obviously you're not paying through the nose for that product. And the last one to come to is casein, and when to take that form of protein. That's generally a protein to be taken later at night, whereas the other two you can obviously take throughout the day after training. Obviously with a concentrate also you can mix that with food a little bit easier than such as the like of isolate and one we haven't touched upon, a hydrolysate, which is a little bit more acidic and what companies find harder to mix with flavorings. So that's why it's a dearer product. It's a better form of it, but obviously due to that acidic taste, it's going to obviously leave with most people. It's going to bring a horrible taste in their mouth. So kind of coming back on myself there, the three differences between concentrate, isolate, and casein is just basically the time frame in which you can take it. So to kind of wrap up on what we've been talking about tonight, to come back to it, if you can get your protein intake from just normal food, I would say definitely do that first. And then, as I was saying with me as the example, obviously if you're having to intake a greater amount of protein to meet your dietary requirements, obviously you want to look at a supplement, which in this case would be a protein shake. And then obviously to look at it from a budget standpoint, obviously each person is going to be different by what they can afford. So it's looking at those constraints as well as your dietary ones to come to a conclusion on what protein you should take. Obviously the first one be it is to get it from a natural source. First and foremost, that's what I would advocate anyway, is to get it from meat, poultry, fish and plant-based proteins first, and then, like I was saying, to only supplement then with a Whey Protein. And before I forget, I would really appreciate it if you would be so kind as to leave a short written review, as it helps to get the podcast more notoriety and it would be more visible in future to others, and thus helping more people, which my guests and I are all about. Once again, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time for another episode of the Mindset Game Podcast.